I'll move forward into the question of, how do we know when these mass mobilizations are having a good chance of success or are likely to succeed? And Charles Tilly used to put forward a four-pronged criteria, which you can remember because it's a funny acronym, which is WUNC, worthiness, unity, numbers, and commitment. And what he argued was basically movements that were able to score well on all four of those criteria were much more likely to be enduring and much more likely to genuinely change the balance of power in a society. And I would say my own criterion is fourfold as well, although it's not totally unrelated to Tilly's. The first is definitely numbers. If we look at the 627 mass mobilizations that have occurred around the world from 1900 to 2019, that is movements with at least 1,000 people calling for the overthrow of a regime, pro-democracy or territorial independence or liberation. If we look at the 627 such movements around the world, those that had the highest numbers of people participating in peak moments were definitely the most likely to achieve success. And part of the reason is that very large numbers are often correlated with a high degree of diversity. That is, the movements also are able to elicit the participation of people cutting across a huge range of locations in the society and social status and kind of political and economic positions. So what does that do for the movement? It gives it really important social power, which can translate into political leverage at key moments, or in some cases, economic coercion and economic leverage. So very large numbers with diverse participants makes the movement more likely to create the second important factor, which is defections from the opponent. So for example, in South Africa, one of the most important factors that led to the fall of the legal apartheid regime was the fact that Black-led boycotts of white-owned businesses, massive organizing that took place in the townships that then blockaded essentially the economic potential of white-owned businesses, essentially created this international momentum that so isolated South Africa from the rest of the global economy that reformists within the party that was the ruling party put direct pressure on party leaders to start to negotiate with and to like remove the ban on the ANC and everything. And it was basically that people power that began to create shifts within the pillars of support that were propping up apartheid, in this case, economic pillars. In other contexts, for example, in Serbia, when there was a movement to overthrow Slobodan Milosevic in 2000 and initiate a democratic transition there, the key pillar that was propping up Milosevic wasn't really economic elites, it was the security forces. And so the movement expanded its numbers and its social power to the extent that when hundreds of thousands of people descended on Belgrade to demand that Slobodan Milosevic leave office after he stole elections, there were people within the security forces who recognized their own children in the crowd. And so here you can see that the effects of that social power on initiating a key moment in the minds of security forces that they actually don't want to go along with repressing the movement and firing on the demonstrators with live fire, but rather they'll just pretend they didn't hear the order. So security forces pretending they don't hear the order is defection. And that's enough to win the day for many movements. So we have large numbers that are very representative of the population. We have the creation of defections within key pillars of the opponent's support base. And those pillars can be security forces, economic elites, civil servants, people within the inner entourage, say, the Trump campaign's lawyers, things like that, who are sort of critical to holding out power when people are calling for change. The third thing that successful movements do is they innovate new tactics. And this is very important because movements that tend to over-rely on a single technique like protest or like demonstrating every Friday or something that becomes very routinized end up succumbing much more quickly, first of all, to protester fatigue. But the second thing is that they also often subject their participants to higher risk of repression or communal violence from opponents. And so movements that are capable of having the capacity to shift to methods of dispersion, like stay-at-homes or strikes or forms of economic non-cooperation, tend to be much more effective because they have a capability of maneuver when the state begins to ramp up violence against them. And so the fourth really important thing that successful movements do is they maintain discipline even when repression does begin to escalate. So what does this look like? It largely looks like they maintain fidelity to their own plan, that they don't get thrown off course, but they actually expect and anticipate repression and then find a way to politically exploit it to their benefit, not welcoming it. Nobody's trying to get repressed, but if it happens, then they try to document it and use it to create what Gene Sharp called political jujitsu, basically making the opponent look weak, look unjust, look barbaric, and therefore amplify the claims of the movement. The second thing that's required in discipline is narrative discipline, which is to say not being thrown off course and distracted by counter narratives that are coming in to attack the movement. Instead, the movement sticks to its own narrative and keeps the focus on the core claim and the justification for the core claim. So those are the four things: numbers, defections, tactical innovations, and discipline. What do we need for those things to happen? We need organizing. I think one of the key reasons why many movements have struggled around the world, including in the United States before now, is that there's been an overemphasis on mobilizing and less has been emphasis on organizing. Because to have the capacity to do these things skillfully means that there has to be a baseline level of trust, political education, collective identity, and also a sense that the struggle is longer than just the next event we have to plan to be in the streets. The struggle is a long struggle, and that even if there's one particular event that gets derailed, we're still going to go up, we're still in this, and it's a long-term kind of struggle. And so movements that end up just sort of planning event to event or march to march or protest to protest are in much more danger of being thrown off course and having these sort of demobilizational factors affect their long-term trajectories.